Hi, this is Brad with Copper Creek Cuts, a lawn care company in Northeast Florida. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've learned in some of the brush clearing jobs that I've had using the Ventrac, which you can see on the trailer, to do light brush clearing, land clearing, that sort of thing. I see a lot of posts of guys saying, hey, I made this many hundreds of dollars in this hour, and while those kind of posts are pretty motivating to see and they're exciting and they might get you excited for this line of work, they're a little bit misleading. So what I mean by that is generally if you are working for an hour on site, you make whatever money that you make, there are a lot of costs that eat that money up that most people don't talk about. And there's also a lot of time that goes into it as well. So for instance, on this job, the customer reached out and said, hey, I've got a job that's probably only going to be a couple hours of work. I pulled up everything he had on satellite imagery and I agreed with him that, yep, it looks like based on the pictures you sent me and the terrain, it will only be a couple hours of work. But my half-day minimum is $500, and I'm probably going to have to charge that because of the travel time, because of all the other things that go into it. So I didn't elaborate all the things that I'm going to elaborate to you, to the client, but I just said, yep, my half-day minimum is $500, and that's what it looks like it's going to be. And so they were okay with that. They understood. This property is a hunting lease, so where I'm at in Northeast Florida, Southeast Georgia, there's tons of timberland, and those timber companies will oftentimes lease out some portions as hunting lands. The customer did not own this property, the timber company did, but the customer has a hunting lease on it, so he needs to clean it up. This property was about 30 to 40 minutes away from me. There's an agricultural inspection station, which if you've never gone to one of those before, they often have them at state borders, and it's to make sure you're not bringing in any kind of fruits, vegetables, animals, anything you're not supposed to be bringing in. I'm kind of in this gray area where I don't think I need to stop, but the signs say trucks, trailers, commercial vehicles, you need to stop every time for inspection. Every time I've ever stopped, I've been waved through, but I'm not going to risk some new guy on the job chasing me down in a patrol car because I blew through the stop. I'm not going to do that. The issue with that is I have been stuck behind a horse trailer before waiting for my turn, where that stop that is normally, just a few seconds in a slowdown turns into a 10 or 15 minute thing. So that means if I'm doing a job that is past that inspection station, I have to wager on stopping at that inspection station, and I would like to be compensated for that time. Another consideration on the satellite, I could see there was several miles of dirt roads before you even got to the customer's property. I have literally had to drive 2 miles an hour before. I'm not joking, 2 miles an hour on dirt roads that had not been maintained. So now anytime I see dirt roads, I say, you know what? Yep, it might only be half a mile down this stretch of dirt road, but that I could still be spending 30 minutes just driving on that dirt road. And all that reasoning applies on the ride home as well. I made a short about this project and said that it takes me about an hour to load and unload, and somebody laughed at me in the comments. They said, it takes you an hour to load, what are you doing? It takes me 5 minutes. And so this machine has to be checked before I use it. I check the fuel, I check the oil, I check the air pressure in all 4 tires. Oftentimes that Ventrac machine does not have the brush cutter attachment on it. I store it with the bucket, so there's swapping out of attachments, there's loading and shuttling it from where it is to where it needs to be. I very often bring the dual wheels, so that's 4 tires that have to be taken out of storage one at a time, walked over to the trailer. There's hand tools that most of the time live in the truck, but I still need to double check and make sure that they're there. Everything has to be strapped down safely. Any miscellaneous tools that I might need for that job, rakes, shovels, those have to be taken out of storage and loaded into the truck. The truck needs to be checked as well. I like to check the oil in that before I go places, make sure the fuel's topped off, make sure I've got all my safety equipment, all my PPE. I've got to make sure I've got food and water and any kind of hydration supplements like little liquid IV packets. All those things have to be packed and loaded. So all that applies to the loading process, and then the unloading process when I get home is very much the same. The machine needs to be cleaned, needs to be topped off with fuel, the radiator screen needs to be blown out, need to check over the tires to make sure none of them picked up any thorns or metal or old bullet casings or anything like that. The attachment that I've used needs to be clean. It needs to be blown out. It needs to be greased. It needs to be put back away in the shed, the right place. Everything has to be put back the way it was before. Any hand tools have to be cleaned and put away. There's just a bunch of stuff that goes into it that most people don't think about. And when they say, I made $500 on the Ventrac for an hour and a half, it just gives a misleading image because it doesn't talk about the 2 hours of travel there might have been. It doesn't talk about the 2 hours of prep time there might have been. And so now your, $400 something an hour figure is really closer to $100 an hour when you figure in all the time that you've spent in. It gets even more sad when you factor in taxes and expenses. Taxes are going to be the biggest one. You're looking at losing 20 to 30% of any job from taxes and self-employment fees. So if it's a $500 job for a half day, I'm down to $350 to $400 right off the bat before I've got any other expenses. The Ventrac's really efficient on fuel. It only burns about a gallon of gas an hour. I usually use ethanol free, so maybe I had $10 on the high side of gas on this job. Not a big deal. But you should also be considering the wear and tear and replacement cost on this machine. So if I never factored that in, at some point down the road when this machine has 4,000 hours on it or whatever it is, when it finally dies, if in those 3,000 or 4,000 hours I have not been saving up, $5, $10, $15 per hour to put towards a replacement cost, well, now here I am down the road in the future and I don't have the money on hand to replace this Ventrac. Now, all that aside, this job went very smoothly. So you can see that I left the house at 1:03 p.m. and I got back at 5:02 p.m. Now, that does not include my loading and unloading time. But at 1:03, I left the house on the way to the job. I got there about 1:54. There was no slowdown at the agricultural station. The dirt road was relatively well maintained. You saw me cruising along 10, 15 miles an hour at the beginning. I did spend about 20 minutes talking to the client at the entrance of the property, kind of establishing the game plan of where he was going to be and what he was going to be doing. From just around 2 o'clock to 4:30, I was working, and I've got air quotes as I'm saying that, because I actually spent about half an hour of that time looking for the customer at one point. There were 2 different sections to mow, and before I started on the second one, I had a question to ask him. There was no cell service where we were, so the only way to find out was either take a gamble and get it wrong or go find him, and he was off cutting some trail somewhere. So I spent about 20 or 30 minutes driving around trying to find him off of the main road from where he and his friends were working on clearing for a tree stand. Between those 2 sections, there was also about 5 to 10 minutes of driving on the dirt road to get to him. So again, even though it was 2.5 hours of working, the actual seat time on the Ventrac where I was mowing was close to an hour. And if I wanted to mislead folks, it would be very easy and very factual for me to say, I made $500 for 1 hour on the Ventrac. And that's technically correct. But again, it doesn't paint the whole picture. It doesn't really help people who are looking at these videos trying to get information about how to run businesses. As I've done more work with the tractor, more stormwater management work, those project type jobs, I've seen that a lot of the cost is going to be in time spent getting ready for those jobs, getting materials ready, getting supplies ready, the travel to and from those jobs, and then all those expenses that you don't really see, right? The insurance, the taxes that you're going to pay when you finally get your money. All those things factor into it, and if you're only thinking about the time that you are on site working and the fuel that you burn, I could be wrong, but I do not see how you're going to make money. So the purpose of this video is not necessarily an entertaining one. I didn't spend a lot of time getting good camera angles. I just had one camera on the front of the machine. This is definitely one of those ones where I want to share a little bit about what I've learned. And again, I'm still a beginner in all this. I've only had the Ventrac for about 2 years now, so I'm still learning and definitely still making mistakes when it comes to bidding this type of work. But my hopes are that as I share these mistakes, as I share the things that I've learned, that you'll be a little bit more informed. If you're trying to get into this work, or if you are in this work, then you can say, I remember that mistake Brad made. Because that's really the only way I've been learning. I come up against some new situation that I have no experience in. I do my best Sometimes it works out. Most of the times I make some mistake where I say, well, now I know better to do that for next time. If you've got any specific questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. Honestly, shooting me an email is going to be the much better way to go. I know when I post these videos, a lot of times they encourage questions about land clearing, stormwater management, the Ventrac machine and its capabilities, and I have no problem answering those. I'd love to help you out in any way I could. It's just that the comments are not the most convenient way for me to reply to you guys because I don't see them all the time. I'm not always on YouTube, so shooting me an email is usually a lot better. As always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.